right, I'm here with Mr. James Seda, Director of Bands at Southwest DeKalb High School, one of the preeminent programs in all of the United States. Mr. Seda has overseen Southwest DeKalb since 2001. Before that, he was at Chapel Hill Middle School, if I'm not mistaken, and was a proud graduate of Florida A&M University.
Absolutely.
So he's made a commitment to music. It's been his passion for a long time. Mr. Seda, if you would talk to us about where all of this has begun for you.
Music, my goodness. I remember vividly probably being 8 or 9 years old. We've always had music in the home, as all good musicians have had. I think music, the foundation for it had to start somewhere, whether it was an influence. In my case, it was direct family influence. My dad always insisted on having music in the house. We had a piano and we had an organ, even though nobody played it well, but it was always in the house. And my father at the time was taking some graduate courses at one of the local universities. And as a part of that, I think an assignment initially, as it started, is he had to observe the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra once a month. And back then, that was the legendary Robert Shaw, who conducted the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra along with a 200-piece Atlanta choir. So not knowing any better, I would go with him. He always took me. And I think the foundation started there. So at a very young age, and not from the school, just through experience, I started to learn the names Mozart. I started to learn Handel's through these big, broad productions. Some of them I couldn't stay awake from, but still, I was in the environment. And even beyond the requirements of doing an assignment, my dad continued that for years and years and years.
So when did you go from just a member of the 5th grade, 6th grade band to this is something I really want to improve at? I want to get better at this. Do you remember, it was a moment as a competition? What happened to take you from just playing to I want to succeed?
It was a period of time. 5th grade band was fun. You got a noisemaker in your hand along with your peers, so you're just going at it. My middle school band experience, those 3 years, I think, did everything for me. My middle school band director, James Camp, at Martin Luther King Middle School in Atlanta, was everything to me. He was the consummate disciplinarian first and foremost. He was as mean as they come, but at the same time, he saw where his heart is and was. Because he put everything into the individual student. It wasn't so much about the band program. You saw the investment. As a young age, we could respect that. He invested in every individual in the program, whether it was sitting down or making sure you had the right equipment. And he held you accountable with a very firm hand, but at the same time, you saw the investment that he made in everyone in the program. And beyond that, he was just a master teacher. I think then I really understood that music was going to be with me for a lifetime.
Wow. So as you developed, I know you went from that middle school program, and just a few short years later, you ended up on scholarship, if I'm not mistaken, at FAMU.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually. What was the process like of for you personally? When you didn't have that discipline there, when did you kind of take ownership of mastering the trumpet, and what did that process look like?
It took a while because going into college, I knew that I would be playing trumpet for a long time, but I didn't know it would become a profession. I didn't think I would become a professional musician by any stretch of the imagination. As much of a musician as my father and my mother encouraged us to be, they wanted us to go into the traditional field. You're going to be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. So my first year and a half at Florida A&M, I was an engineering major.
Oh, wow.
And I was an engineering major, and I didn't have such a big passion for mathematics. I will say that. I did it because I had to. But I was an engineering major that every break I got, I was in the band room. Of course, I was in the Florida A&M marching band. I was in the concert band. Eventually got in the jazz ensemble, and eventually I started to find myself being in every single ensemble and group that I could be with. So I spent just as much, if not more time in the music building than I did with the engineering. And ultimately, I don't know if somebody just gave me the advice or I just realized that if this is your passion, go ahead and follow it. And I made the switch.
Wow. So sophomore year, at FAM about halfway through.
Right.
You made the, you know what, if this is what I love to do, I'm gonna do it. Full disclosure, I'm one of Mr. Seda's students back from 2008. I have seen, or I've heard a lot of the stories about how great you became. Legendary trumpet player, could scream, could do it all. Technically sharp. Just for you as you were developing as a trumpet player, I have to ask you about individual practice. You spent all this time in these ensembles, but what did individual practice mean to you and your ability to become who you became?
I think I had to learn that. I had to learn how to practice as an individual when I got there. And one thing that I owe a lot of it to is I had some really good examples for trumpet players down there. It was a really strong legacy and for playing trumpet down there at the time. And it probably still exists, but at one time, the legendary trumpet teacher, Leonard Bowie, and he just recently passed last year. He was a trumpet teacher there through a good part of the 60s and the 70s. And, story has it in Tallahassee, not only with Florida A&M, but with Florida State University, which is probably one of the top 3 music schools in the country. The Florida A&M Trumpet Studio would have these legendary recitals with Dr. Bowie's students, the FAMU students in town. And everyone knew when those recitals were taking place at FAMU, every trumpet player in the city would pack the recital hall. When I got there, that environment still kind of existed. So the older trumpet players there, I saw them going off into the corner with this big, thick book, and I wanted to know what it was. So ultimately I asked, and that's when they introduced me to the Auburn book. People call that the Trumpet Bible. And just thumbing through the book, it can be intimidating. So I had older people to teach me how to practice. Sit down and work on this, sit down and work on this. And eventually that kind of just became the vocabulary for my trumpet playing as well as other trumpet players.
That's very exciting to hear, especially as you were working through the Auburn, you call it? Was that it?
That's it.
So the Auburn, and you were learning these skills. What do you remember looking back as you were developing as a trumpet player was most challenging about getting through all of that?
My goodness. The initial thing is I would never finish this book, first of all. And then I found out that's probably not the most important thing. You just have to deal with, and first of all, have the honesty to assess what it is that you need to develop, and being committed to developing, whether it's just tone production, whether it's projection, whether it's rapid articulation. And you as a musician, you can get so scattered by trying to master so much that you don't master anything. And just having the discipline to concentrate on those individual elements at a time, and even if you have to leave it and revisit it, just be as consistent as possible in your approach to trying to master a particular skill. And it's a lifetime thing, but I think that method as a trumpet player and being introduced to those materials really developed that discipline.
That's great. So after your time at FAM, you have now had a chance to play trumpet professionally. Thinking of the time seeing you in the movie Drumline, playing When the Saints Go Marching In. I am thinking of the stories I've heard about jazz festivals, both here and in Europe. Can you talk about how your development as a trumpet player first has then kind of projected you into the experiences that you've had playing professionally, and then we'll get into as a band director.
Right. I think I've just been fortunate to either be with the right group or meet the right people or be in the right environment so these opportunities can open up. I had a great time touring Europe when we did in some of those huge jazz festivals, one in Montreux, Switzerland, some of the ones in Paris, and other places, North Seas, Amsterdam. Those things are about as good as they get. And light bulbs come on in different phases of your life, and I think that's really when I understood how much the world loves jazz and how we kind of take jazz for granted here in the States. It is our music form that we developed here, but they're really taking it and nurturing it to the point that you're speaking to a layman or a non-musician, and they're speaking the language of jazz probably better than you.
You left FAM, and you continued to play. But you've also become a band director, and I think as a community, knowing that you've been at Southwest DeKalb for coming up on 14 years now, you've really helped solidify this band program as an icon across the country. And the fact that I, as an alumnus, can say to anybody in the country, that band that was in the drumline, that was Southwest DeKalb, that was us. So now I ask you, as band director, those skills that you learned as a player, how have they transferred into leading the band first? And then if you'll address how it has transferred into inspiring other young people to apply that same kind of discipline that you learned.
First of all, as a musical leader, one of my mentors, and I probably have about 5 or 6 people that I can always go to and talk to as far as how I need to maybe better myself as a musician and as a leader. But one of my mentors as a leader, he always reminded me that you have to be the master musician in the room. If you're standing in front of a group of kids, you have to present yourself as a master musician. Whether it's students, parents, administrators, you are the musician. And I guess saying it in such a plain way, it gives you a responsibility that what I say is going to become a part of this kid's habit. So you got to arm yourself with all the right information. Okay. Because kids nowadays they're an open book and they're a sponge, and in that whatever you give them at the time, whether it's right or wrong, they're going to accept that as a gospel, especially if they look up to you as a mentor. So training myself to get all of this information, not only about trumpet, but about all of the instruments and just about music in general, because I put it into perspective sometimes with the kids, and within a 90-minute class, we probably play from beginning to end for about 25 minutes. The rest is lecture, and they're listening to you, and they're absorbing, and they're taking in, and they're forming into their own knowledge base what you're telling them. So you give them bad information, here's someone else that's going to go on and continue that bad information, especially if they want to continue on what you're doing. So it makes you read, it makes you study, it makes you not want to be complacent and really get good, solid substance information that you can give to these students. So that's the first thing. Influencing and encouraging these kids to do better is a little bit more than talk. And I think they got to understand that even if I don't want to be a musician in the future, having this opportunity right now that's probably going to put me and take me to places that I may not get an opportunity to go to, and not that that's the only motivation and encouragement, but just getting an opportunity, even if it's just sitting in this auditorium and playing to a full audience. You don't get to do that more than that one time. That might be the last time for some people. So every chance you get, try to present the best that you can. And with that is going to come the practice, and you have to develop the skills. You got to commit yourself to excellence, and for that one opportunity, they call it that 15 minutes you have on stage, you try to make that the most memorable 15 minutes. And I tell the students all the time, your next performance should be your best performance. Right.
So how do you go from taking all that you've learned playing the trumpet to being a director of bands where trumpets are, I won't say aren't as big of a part as the trombones would be?
Well, part of the training as a music major in college is you have to take terms or semesters or even years on studying a particular instrument group. And the main instrument families are the woodwinds, the brass, percussion, and strings. And then, of course, piano just being the foundation for everything. And during the semester or year for those particular instruments, you get an opportunity to study all of the instruments. As a brass player, some of the brass things came a little easier for me. Of course, you have to learn the trombone slides, and you have to learn all of the different ins and outs of the French horn. Yeah. But that was kind of familiar. Woodwind was a little stretch. Yeah. But again, the foundation for the woodwind instruments being clarinet, saxophone, flutes, and then eventually bridging over to the double reeds. You have to study, and you're studying it with the, I guess what we call the applied, but the professional teachers for those specific instruments within anybody's music department, and every college has them. Piano was tough because I took piano lessons, oddly enough, as a child, but I dropped out. Just didn't,
too, right?
Didn't have. I didn't have the long-term discipline, so I had to work a little bit harder at piano. But again, to answer the question, you're required to study those instruments for terms at a time in college.
Okay. Last question as we're wrapping up. You speaking of passion, you've been in this capacity, and I can say as your student, to see you as band director now versus in 2008, even I'm able to see, wow, Mr. Seda's getting better. The band is better now than we were then, and I thought we were the best ever then. You think about this as you've dedicated your life to it now. It has been your passion. What do you want the legacy of your work in this program to be moving forward?
I just want people to really know and understand that I have a true love for music and presenting it as high as, I don't care if it's a group of beginners playing their first concert for the first time or the absolute best and masterful musicians we have. I want the music to be honest. I want it to be at a very high level, and I want the kids to love it. At the end of the performance, I want them to be proud of it. And even beyond my legacy, the legacy of what this community is, it goes back way beyond the 14 years that I've been here. It goes beyond the time that Don Robert started. Don Robert is one of those mentors that I spoke with. And as a matter of fact, and I think this is worth saying, coming out of college as a student teacher, I didn't really know that I wanted to be a band director. I knew that I wanted to be a trumpet player and a musician. But watching him teach and watching the passion that he had with the Southwest DeKalb band at the time, and getting an opportunity every day to shadow him and take his lessons, and once in a while he just throw me to the fire, here, you do the band for the day, is what really developed. And I realized it was hard. I realized it was tough. I realized high school students aren't easy. But I realized that once you make that connection and once you get them to buy into it, then it's probably one of the best experiences that anybody could have. So the legacy and the tradition of band here in the Southwest DeKalb community is rich. It goes back a long time. And anybody in a position of leadership here at Southwest DeKalb, I think, has a tremendous responsibility to make sure you always maintain the musical integrity of what the school is.
That's wonderful. Mr. Seda, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it very much.
It.
Yeah, and looking forward to featuring the Southwest DeKalb band program with Commit.
I appreciate it, Austin.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.